Well, I think we're about at the point where I don't want to, I have other questions of my own, but we're at about 20 minutes of the hour, and I think it's time for us to open it up for the audience to ask a few questions. And I think we'll follow the same protocol we've been following earlier in the conference. Raise your hand and someone will bring you a microphone.
I want to thank all of you for providing your testimonies today. My question is for Jennifer and your colleagues up there. I appreciated you speaking to the challenges of supporting people who've never experienced sort of like their own power and how they exert that. My colleagues here with me today work with folks who've been very marginalized and persecuted in many instances. And so I really see this as maybe a point of struggle for us as we embark on this work. And so I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about some of the strategies that you all have tried to employ in that capacity, including those that didn't work. I always find that to be very helpful.
So I think immediately what didn't work was an assumption that we made that when, we had everybody at the table and we took down the power structures, that automatically, magically, everybody would know how to actually embrace it and move forward. So it was about assumptions, and assumptions that people would welcome the power. Some other challenges were I don't want this power. No, take it away. So I think for us, those were some of the huge areas that just kind of took us aback because we weren't prepared for it. Now we know, so now when we approach it, it's different. I think, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to our girls are much more agile and resilient than our team members have been in this journey. And so with our team members, some of the strategies that we're taking now is being very transparent and being very vulnerable. We have created recently and rolled out, we call them insight forums. And these insight forums are being led by team members, not our executive leadership team. It's being sponsored by our director level, but it's being facilitated with team members across all levels of the organization. And the purpose of these insight forums is to gather specifically feedback around systems and processes internally within the organization. So we've got processes in place around how do you feel about the organization, but that tends to be a place where people get more guarded. And so we figured if we start with insight forums that focus on the functional aspects of the organization, then it gives people an opportunity to try out what this feels like without necessarily having to be vulnerable, with it having to be me specifically. I can absolutely talk about this process and how this process could improve or what I don't like. Because when we jumped to the other end, we found, we needed to step back. So I think, it's understanding your population, engaging, finding who those who do get it and who want and are willing to explore using that power constructively, because that's the other thing. We did see some people where that power all of a sudden was not being used in alignment with our values and guiding principles as a PACE team member. So getting to understand them and then finding safer, which is why I loved the example you gave, safer ways to start practicing the use of that power. And that's where we are right now. So far, the Insight Forums it's being widely accepted. It's voluntary. We're not making it mandatory. But we're getting increasing participation. So it's going the right direction. Ask us in a year to see what the outcome of that. So that's what I would say. It's really gauge and try to find a safer option for people to practice the use of that power.
Did you have something to add, Jesse? No, I didn't.
Hi, I'm David from Liberia. I work with Global Fund for Children. I've been so inspired by Pay Center for Girls. We also support grassroots partners. And in our context, the girls, whilst growing up, they grow up with the belief that their voice doesn't matter. No one listens to them. A girl is not supposed to talk. So when partners work with them, it becomes so difficult to get them to talk at the beginning. So it takes time to build that trust before they believe that they also have a voice and they can share. So I want to know whether you also have that kind of challenge, and how long does it take? Because I've observed with the partners that it takes a long time to help the girls to open up and start believing in themselves and sharing. So I just want to hear what is the experience here in the U.S.
I'll start and I'll pass it over to Princiana. It does, for some girls, it does take a long time to build the trust. They might be with us for 6 months and they just sit back and watch because they want to know that if we say something, we're going to follow through. And, the first time we follow through, they don't, necessarily believe that it's going to happen again. So when they see us tell them something, follow through with it, and do that over and over, and consistently among the staff, they become comfortable, and then they feel like they can speak up, and they know that they're going to be heard and follow through upon whatever it is that they need or ask for, or just their opinion about it.
I would just like to say that, like you mentioned, when I was at a regular public school, I didn't have a voice, and I just knew from my own household, that you can't say certain stuff, and what you say is limited, and you're not able to say what you really feel. And when I came to PAYS, I was a little to myself, but then I seen that I was actually surrounded by good people that had a good heart. So then that made me realize that, okay, I'm here, and now I am able to actually speak, and I'm able to actually have an opinion with things. So then I became comfortable, and then, I started advocating for myself, and it made me feel very, very listened to. So then, when I became a GLC member, it was a little overbearing because I had to speak more and I had to think of ideas more, and it was a little, challenging, but then I got used to it, and I learned that the teachers here are in my best interest. So then that made me more, comfortable.
So both of these questions make me also think about some of the basics of the feedback loop. And one of the things we hear from organizations is those first few times they collect feedback, if it's new, they hear, "You're great, everything's fine." And they're like, why? Of course, because of the power dynamics, who's going to say something negative? And so it's really that going back to the principle of closing the loop. And once people see somebody said something negative and nothing happened, there were no negative repercussions, and something was actually done and they were listened to, once you close that loop, and it doesn't happen immediately, but it's that repeated exactly to this point, once people see that the input is listened to, that's a game changer, because so often it hasn't been. And so that is a key mechanism for building trust. And over time, we hear from organizations we work with that they see more and more candid feedback coming because they've laid that groundwork through the repeated process of feedback, that people feel like there is that safe space, and through the conditions that they've created to start to provide. But I'm not going to suggest it happens overnight or that it's easy, but I think that's another key piece of the puzzle from a feedback perspective.
Oh, there's a question at the third table here. Yes, I meant you, yes.
There's an optimal metric of like psychological safety within an organization that is ideal before feedback can really be effective. And now through hearing this, it sounds like it's all kind of intertwined. So I guess my question is more from a research perspective, is there a correlation between concepts, like in work where psychological safety is an established concept, is there any correlation between how effective that is and how effective feedback loops are? Do you know what I'm asking? Might be too highly technical, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. I think there's a connection. I think there's just multiple points of entry for building that psychological safety. So when we work with organizations that are new to feedback loops, we tend to guide organizations to do anonymous feedback as a first place. Why? Because it provides some psychological safety inherently. Then there's a lot of ways, sort of practices you can do. But I think there's also organizations where culture's in a different place, where they may already have some strong fundamental commitments. I think of both of your organizations have been, centered on the clients and the girls or the youth that you're serving in a way that there's also ways to get to that psychological safety. So I wouldn't say I think though it's got to be, it's a key like lubricant to making the system work well, and it's just sort of how quickly you can get there, or how that would be my thought, but I'd be curious what you guys think too.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is we're human beings, so while we may have that lubricant, it's part of the culture. Anytime you have new people coming in and new different interactions, past experiences, I think that automatically changes it. And so I guess what I'm trying to say, you never reach that place where it's, yes, our systems and processes create psychological safety, because as people come in and out, that's gonna change. And so you have to continuously be working on it, building it, going back to closing the feedback loop. And so it doesn't stop, you continue.
We use safety, we gather information on safety and sense of belonging. And what we have seen is that those are, in terms of measures, really, really predictive of that positive feeling and being able to listen.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. So statistically, there is a positive correlation, and she can give you the numbers to that.
Oh, I don't think I have the level of psychological safety within my organization to be effective with this. I can say, no, this can help to build psychological safety. Yeah, these two things work hand in hand. Got it, thanks.
Was there a question in the back that was waiting, or? Anyone else? Yes, here's one right here. Alexis.
Thank you. So obviously this work of using feedback to foster equity is really challenging, and I'm wondering, I mean, as a society, we're facing so many inequities, and we have a lot of deep work to do in understanding what that looks like, unlearning norms and systems and structures that have perpetuated those inequities, learning new skills, new vocabulary, new ways of having conversations. And so I'm wondering, do you think those things are necessary to do before you embark on on using feedback to foster equity? Are they a result of using feedback to foster equity? Do they go hand in hand? Are they things that, is there an order to things of doing that deep organizational work first to prepare yourselves to embark on a conversation about fostering equity through feedback? Would just be interested to hear kind of what you've learned and observed.
I'd say that our organization's our equity journey and our feedback journeys were in parallel, but probably honestly weren't informed until like Valerie reached out to like talk about equity and feedback once. And I'm like, oh, this is really working. But also talking with an impact study, it was like just kind of asking us questions about like trying to see like also what came first and how did we get to the level that we were. And I think that they are things that in some ways can happen in parallel, but I think that they're most impactful when you like realize like how they're integrated and how they definitely play off each other. That's my own personal opinion. I can't imagine that there's like one size fits all for all organizations. You know, our organization is also really small. We serve about up to 150 youth a year. So you know, it's a much smaller fraction. So.
You mentioned earlier that like the mentors, you had to do some work around language and sort of differences as part of the feedback. And how did you could you do that after having gotten feedback, or did you?
Oh, around like languages.
Around the languages and sort of like.
No, maybe not to the same degree. I think it took some iterations of doing it, but also our programming staff are like really big advocates for our young people. A lot of them have social work or human services backgrounds, so they're like, how are we going to make sure that people who don't have access to internet, who speak Spanish, like how are they going to? Oh, sorry.
So that language of the mentors sort of feeling comfortable, that the mentors weren't comfortable connecting on difficult issues.
Oh, yeah. We're still kind of like figuring out that in some way. So I think it's always going to change again. I think it's. Yeah, I don't have a great answer for this. Sorry, but I think that it does make us have to be introspective and think about equity in a different way, because like obviously when it's men and people who are older who traditionally have like more power are the ones who are having these like negative or like less positive response rates or connections. Like it makes us really think like, well, obviously we can't interact with everyone the same, but it's just in a sort of really different way.
I think I know at the center level, we are PACE Center for Girls. And from feedback from our students, some of them do not want to be referred to as girls. They want different pronouns, and they have, through feedback, helped us. We had to make a thank you card, and the young person said, can we not put girls? Can we just put from PACE students? I was like, sure. That's fine. Even at the national level, we have our 9 guiding principles, which are more feminine in nature. And a year ago, 2 years ago, they came out so they were more gender neutral than just centered on girls. The students that we have are very understanding. And part of that is for us to acknowledge when we haven't been doing our part. If we slip up, to apologize to them and say, I'm sorry, please remind me if I say it again. And because of the advocacy that we're teaching them, they will speak up and say, please use this name or this pronoun, or please remember in the meeting not to say girls, to say students. So they do really use their voice with that.
Well, I think we are just about out of time and don't really have time for any more questions, and I didn't see any. So we will end it with a question in just a moment. I just want to say my takeaway from this conversation is that if we really want to see feedback drive equity, it has to be structured, it has to be designed into the how, so that the way that the feedback is gathered invites and facilitates the participation of everyone we want to hear from in whatever way they are comfortable, whether it is getting beyond their access to the internet, or whether they want to provide that feedback in a focus group, or whether they want to do it through an anonymous survey, figuring out how to make it accessible to all those folks. And then at the end, the feedback, at the end of feedback, those who provided feedback should be able to see their power. They should be able to see their power and feel their power on the move because something happened that was beyond being heard, but something was done. That's my takeaway. I want to go to the, we'll skip the survey? I think that maybe I've spoken too much, or we've asked enough questions and had enough rich conversation that we will skip the last poll. Shall I turn it over to you? Have a great evening, and I'm going to...
Yes, big round of applause for our closing panel. Thank you to Brian, to the folks at PACE, Listen for Good, Silver Lining Mentoring. Thank you so much.